What if sensitive people, empaths, and people pleasers are all the same pattern? Sensitive people come in many forms. The empath is someone who feels other people's emotions, oftentimes feels everything in a room. The people pleaser is reacting and anticipating other people's actions and emotions so that they know how to react. And a sensitive person can feel other people's emotions, hear other people's thoughts, and just take on more energy, more input than they are releasing or moving through. So all of these are different aspects of sensitivity. The people pleaser being, I would say, the most the most impressioned by a traumatic environment. So when we're sensitive growing up and we have an environment such as, an abusive parent or an alcoholic parent, somewhere where we're not totally safe, then we have to learn to anticipate the needs of that person or the actions of that person, and then what we can do to counteract it. So with all of these sensitive people, whether they've ended up being a people pleaser, and I would say most sensitive people, most empaths also have learned some people pleaser techniques, even if they didn't grow up in an abusive household, just to avoid taking on so much of what someone else is experiencing or feeling. Because it can be almost like a trauma or an abuse for them when someone's emotions are really intense, or their thoughts, their feelings that they're holding in, repressed emotions, can even be really intense for sensitive people. So even if they're not being outwardly expressed, sensitive people can still feel them, which is hard for some people to understand when they're suppressing the emotions. But all of these people have adapted to their environment, and they've learned certain things about how to navigate and stay safe, stay protected. And many of them have similar aspects where they don't just take on the energy of the room, they've learned to read it before they even enter. They oftentimes ruminate over things after they've experienced them, though what could I have done differently? They often feel like whatever happened was their fault, the self-blame, because there's not enough distinguishing between what's yours and what's mine. What am I responsible for? What are they responsible for? Right, because we just aren't taught these skills in society. Okay, so as we move forward, these people, as they are starting to learn boundaries, we start to learn boundaries. We also start to feel guilty even when we're learning, oh, I need space. We feel guilty that we need space because we feel like, oh, we should be taking care of someone else, serving someone else. So there is this idea that someone else's needs are more of a priority than our own. Okay. And one of the things that happens is that we adapt. We adapt, like I said, by learning to read a room, read a situation, alter our behavior to try to keep something from escalating. And often we're very aware of what other people are doing, what other people are feeling, what's happening for them, and very disconnected with what's happening for ourselves. And that's both a protective mechanism and a learned behavior, in as far as, again, that boundary is just not clear. We don't know which part is us and which part is them, and so we are more involved with what's going on with their emotions oftentimes, and less like, oh, this is what I feel, this is what I need, right? Less connected to ourselves and more wrapped up in the other person's or other people's energy. So when we look at this behavior and pattern, right, and the person's disconnected from themselves, they've learned that's what they need to do. They've learned it through environments where they weren't safe to express themselves. So they learned early on, to keep quiet. Often when we're sensitive too, we see things, we feel things that other people don't. So this is another place where we've learned not to use our voice again, like I said, it doesn't just have to come from growing up in an abusive household or a toxic environment. It can just be like, oh, sweetie, we don't talk about that. We don't see things like that, right? You're seeing energy, or you're feeling, what's going on with your classmate or your teacher. We don't talk about that, right? So there's this um, learning that we can't speak our truth or use our voice. We stay very quiet and internalized. And that also promotes a disconnection from the self. So we're not safe to express. And we also have a conditional love situation, usually either from mom or dad or both, right? There's a set of rules or procedure, like under these circumstances, if you do X, Y, and Z, then you're loved, then you're nurtured, then you're cared for, then you're accepted. But if you don't mark off all the checks on the checklist, then you don't feel the love, you don't feel the nurturing, your needs aren't met. So this very conditional upbringing can really affect how we tend to shape or form ourselves into more acceptable, what we think is more acceptable personalities or appearances, ways of showing up, right? And really just having to like always read the room. So this sensitive people are like, they're kind of always on guard. They're always on alert. They're always paying attention to all the little details. So there's something very different here. This isn't about like staying tuned in. This is keeping the nervous system in hyperdrive, right? Because it's not quite vigilance, although it could be considered vigilance, but it's definitely like in the vigilance category. They're always paying attention, scanning the room, reading the room, noticing, spikes in people's personalities, who's maybe going to be problematic for them, and they might need to kind of move out of their way or appease them in order to not be a target, things like that, right? So the cost ends up being self-abandonment. That's number one. That's the biggest one. We constantly are leaving our own needs for the needs of someone else in order to protect ourselves. That's where it comes from. It's like a safety mechanism. But in the process, our own needs are being abandoned. So self-abandonment, number one cost that this brings, this pattern that empaths, sensitive, and people pleasers all have. The number two cost is the conditional approval. So with this when it's a pattern, right, it continues to show up in our life, in our relating and in our relationships. So we continue to see relationships of conditional approval over and over again until we start to break this patterning down. That does not mean that in the end that you are not a sensitive person. It means that you learn to be sensitive and use it as your superpower, right? When you really tap in and anchor that sensitivity and you're connected to the infinite divine energy and the earth and your own center, right? Then you're tapped into your intuition, you're hearing your inner voice, and that is feeding. You don't need to read the room because you can feel it all, and then you're receiving the information that just tells you. It's a very different, right? It feels at ease. You get the information that you need to have. You don't get the information you don't need to have. You don't need to know who as a potential threat. You only need to know when they are a threat. And that's the difference when you're in line with your intuition versus this high alert, right? It's like you hear, oh, this is the truth of what is happening versus this is what might happen. Nervous system up here versus nervous system regulated in here, as we learn to distinguish and draw those boundaries and release responsibility for others and their processes. Release, 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 release. Oftentimes these people are overgivers and they end up being unseen, largely feeling unseen in their life, right? One of the things that often happens with people pleasers is that they're putting out a lot. They're not getting fed enough. So this is not the same as like I'm taking in input as far as what I am perceiving, what I am noticing, the energy I'm tapping into. That's all input, like my receptors, right? That's not the same thing as being nurtured and fed in that way. So that's what I'm talking about. Like we're giving from a nurturing, healing, loving place, but we're not receiving that back necessarily because there's a lot of safety with receiving because it's been conditional. So there's often reluctance to receive because, okay, well then what do you want from me? What are you going to want in exchange? Because that's always been the deal up until now, right? Okay, so there's also the cost of, for these people, for us people, you know, because I've had to learn all of this too, is it's like the difference between anxiety and intuition, which is, I just illustrated, I'm also like looking at my notes. I want to make sure I'm getting everything for you guys, you know, and that's that place where I'm talking about the nervous system up here versus the nervous system downregulated, and hearing your intuition clean and clear versus the anxious version. You know, I was talking to a friend the other day who was worried she was pregnant because she was hearing this voice when she was going to bed, you're pregnant, you're pregnant. And I tuned in for her and I said, you know, that it feels like it's anxiety, but I always like to check, I'll just get a little clearer, just check in for you. Like, yeah, it's your anxiety. That's not your intuition. If you're getting that and that's how it's making you feel, then that's not the truth. The truth, when you tap into your intuition, it should feel calm, it should feel quiet, and it should land like a soft feather. There shouldn't be this this confusion. This shouldn't be this place where it's like, oh, is it this or is it that? Okay, it shouldn't confuse you. And, you know, I mean, she wasn't pregnant, which was very clear a couple weeks later, even though I already told her that. But really good example, anxiety versus intuition, okay? So the shift that we're looking for in all this buildup, I know it's like, woo, a lot of information. The shift that we're looking for is staying connected to ourself and being able to set our boundaries and have that self-trust, down-regulate the nervous system, get in our own field and clear everybody else out. So it's very clear, okay, this is me, this is mine, this is my field, this is my body, these are my feelings, this is my energy, this is my need, this is my want, this is my desire. Get really clear on that. Start building that. That is the shift we're looking for. And it's okay to say no. So really finding that if there's any fear, if it brings up any anxiousness in your body, any fear, any contraction, when you think about saying no to people and really holding to that, then look at it a little bit deeper. Don't be afraid to go into the shadow of that a little bit. Okay, why am I afraid? What's the consequence, or what has the consequence been in the past? Where in the past did that take me? If I said no, let's say I did grow up in an abusive household, or I just grew up in a household where it was like, there's all kinds of different abuse, right? Neglectful. If I said no, I didn't get dinner. That's a very likely scenario. I've seen it before, guys. I've worked with people like that. It's like, you do not defy the person in control, because if you do not get a simple need met. That's real, and that leaves a mark, right? But it is no longer true now. So something like that is something you want to look at. You want to remind that part of yourself that's not true anymore. And it is okay to say no now and have that boundary and stand up for yourself, right? And you don't have to abandon yourself, not say what you need, which is your no, right? Because of the consequence, because that person no longer has control over your life. All right. Okay. That's the shift we're looking for. Couple of simple tricks, right? And ultimately, all of this means the nervous system's going to have to come down. The field is going to have to be clear, your field of other people's stuff. You're going to have to get to know it, without the other people in it. You're going to have to bring the nervous system down so you can feel yourself in a calm, clear, regulated state without other people's energy in your field. Grounded. So you want to ground. You want to do some breathing practices. 4-4-4. Slow inhale, even slower exhale out the mouth. Okay, these are simple. You can find them anywhere, but they're very effective when repeated, when we stay committed to them and we don't just do them one time, okay? Big one, pause before saying yes to anything. Pause before saying yes. And just check out right now, like, how does that feel in your body? When you think about pausing before saying yes, rather than it being automatic, because I guarantee you, if you're one of these sensitive people, sensitive empath, people pleaser, then you have automatic yeses. You are pre-programmed to say yes. So it's like, ooh, there probably is a little bit of a like, ooh, struggle, inner struggle, right? No, I'm going to say no. What happens, right? Okay. So pause before saying yes. I'm not telling you have to say no. It will be important to learn to say no, but pause before you say yes and really feel in, is this the right thing for me? Is this what I need right now? Okay. And then I want you to do the same thing with energy. I want you to do the same thing if you feel a shift in your energy, especially if you shift your environment. Okay. Is this mine? I'm suddenly feeling irritated and angry, whereas I was fine before. And my husband just got home and he was not too happy with his day. And now I feel irritated. So is this mine or is this his? Right? Just pause. Whose is it? Identify. And then allow yourself for it to be okay to let it go, to release some of that. Okay? And then I want you to start really asking yourself, what do I need? What are my needs? Not just in the moment, if somebody's asking something of you, but in general. So you start prioritizing your needs, the need of what makes you feel good, what makes you feel nourished, what makes you feel taken care of. And then how can you carve out time for each of these things in your schedule, in your day, in your week, even if it's 5 minutes, and allow yourself to feel good about it. Allow yourself to feel good about it and not guilty and not like you're taking away from something or someone else, okay? And then allow others to feel disappointed because you're going to be practicing saying no, and they might be disappointed because they're probably used to saying yes, and you're not responsible for their disappointment. So allowing it, releasing responsibility for it. And all of this, taking all these points, right? Putting these practices together, this is anchoring that sensitivity in to be your superpower. Because when you anchor this in, you're going to know things before anybody else does. You're going to feel them before anybody else does. You're going to be able to predict things, but not have them feel like a weight or a hindrance on you. And you're going to feel guided and navigated in your life. And you're going to be able to help others if you choose. If you choose. But when you think about all of the energy output that you've been giving, and even just getting a fraction of that back by drawing boundaries, regulating your nervous system, and really, really feeling into what you need, I think you'll see a big shift in your energy level. That feeling of burnout might start to kind of dissipate a little bit. Not saying it's the, everything, but I think it will lessen when you start anchoring this, and that quiet intuition will start to get louder, and you'll start to hear truth really easy and really quickly. And it's going to become really easy to navigate through life and get what you need. All right. I hope that's helpful and informative. Shoot me questions, thoughts, and, or check out one of my offers. I'm happy to work with any of you to help sharpen your gifts, release any of those blocks or stuck points that are keeping you from drawing those boundaries and claiming your energy and your sensitivity as a superpower. All right, much love, many blessings.